Good evening, please. Welcome back to another video. Tonight we're talking about Jeremy Doku. I think it's Doku. Is it Doku or Doku? This gentleman alongside me definitely knows a thing or two. I think he said Doku actually when we were chatting off air. Is that right? Is it Doku?
Oh, that is right indeed.
That is right. Anyway, this wonderful chap alongside me is Alex Barker from Tifo IRL, and of course you may know as Euro Expert over on Twitter and TikTok, and his own YouTube channel, of course, as well. And I was tweeting around earlier, and I was like, someone recommends someone who's an expert on French football from Ligue 1. And Umir, my mate, replied tagging you in. I was like, why didn't I think you straight away? This, of course, is a chance to talk a little bit more about Manchester City's future signing. He's on the plane already. He's landed in Manchester, so he's basically doing his medical. It's all but done, basically. This guy is a Manchester City player. So, Alex, thank you so much for coming on the channel, mate. Are you good? Are you well?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you for having me on, man. It's a pleasure. A big shout out to Amir as well, of course, for putting my name out there. A legend of the game.
That man just getting everywhere. You can't avoid his face. Not that you'd want to. It's a beautiful face. But yeah, mate, thank you so much for coming on. So today, as you can see, guys, at the bottom, we're going to try and talk about all those categories. Obviously, it's a relatively loose conversation just about this guy, but hopefully it'd be a chance to learn a little bit more. If you're like me, you've know of him, you know his name, you've seen the old clip here and there, you've seen him for Belgium, but you don't watch him every week. This could hopefully be interesting. So, Alex, what was your initial reaction when you heard that this news was breaking? Because I know you're a bit of a fan of this guy, personally.
Yes, it was one of smugness. That was my initial reaction.
The best reaction.
Exactly that. Yeah, I happened to make a video on Jeremy Doku before I even joined Tifo, and on why I thought he'd be a perfect signing for Manchester City. And I started the video by saying, bold, I know, and it's turned out lovely. But
cheeky?
The honest
is it you? Are you cheeky being
yes.
this guy?
Yeah, I was like, oh, Pep, that is you listening to me. But no, my honest reaction really was just I was a little surprised, to be honest. I didn't think City would pull the gun so early, but at the same time, the reason I made the video, I think it does make a lot of sense for them, especially the squad they've got right now.
Okay. I think, to be honest, that's probably a fair reaction as well. I think the world was relatively surprised because it feels like City, especially with a young player, they tend to wait for that next step. You know, we're not usually the finishing school. We're normally unless it's like a really cheap bargain, like an Alvarez or something like that from South America. And they're built differently in South America, you know, so it tends to be Gabriel Jesus, people like that. I don't know, they just seem to be ready for European football. Not always, but just a little bit different. But in this one instance, I was like, okay, we're going for a 21-year-old winger who's known to be a little bit raw, explosive, very different to what you associate with Manchester City. It just doesn't feel right. Not that I was complaining, it just felt different. But let's talk about the player a little bit more now. So, of course, he's 21 years old, Belgian international. How long has he been at Rennes for? I can't remember now. About 3 years, is it? 2-3 years? Something like
that? Yeah, since 2020.
Yeah, and obviously he joined from Anderlecht. The story about him in general was that he shot to fame at the KDB Cup or something like that, an invitational, where he was like player of the tournament. So KDB's always like, you're the man. Maybe he's being Pep's here. So basically, there's your sort of overview of him. In terms of player, Alex, what position is he? What can Manchester City fans expect from him?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because at Rennes, he's played both off the left and the right wing. I think we'll talk a little more in depth about Rennes a bit later on, but just as an overview, they've played over the past couple of years under Bruno Genesio. They've played a 4-4-2 system, which generally morphs into a 4-3-3. The right midfielder comes inside and the left midfielder pushes up to join the front two, and it forms a front three. And Doku isn't really a player to play in midfield. I think anyone who's watched any sort of highlight of him will tell you that.
Don't get Pep ideas, mate. You never know with Pep.
Very good point indeed. So he's played more off the left, but I think he's tended to shine more off the right. Essentially, he's not to go too much into his profile yet, but he's a very dribbly player. He tends to do best when he's very out wide, isolated against someone. So when he's coming inside, he can do that role, but I think he gets a bit better luck when he's on the right, he's pulling wide, he's got the fullback at him, and he can just go.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be a very obvious dribbly boy, as someone put in the chat. A dribbly boy. I mean, I've got one of them downstairs asleep below me, so I'm not being too loud. That's the reason why. Would you say he favours either side in particular? Because, you know, at City, I don't know where he's going to play him, but I think there's options and there's chances on left and right wing for him at the moment. Because Grealish, Pep had a comment the other day in a press conference where he talked about Grealish, right now in particular, not having the brilliance, you know, the individual brilliance out wide. And, of course, Mahrez has moved on. Is there a side that you think he prefers?
So He's never said exactly a side. I personally think he does better on the right, but what he has said interestingly is that he doesn't tend to do as well in central areas. There was an interview of him on HLN Sport. I think it's a Dutch news site. Very nice interview with him. Well, he mentioned how he said how he didn't like playing down the central areas, and he also interestingly, when asked about comparisons to Eden Hazard, he said I have similar profiles, and obviously Hazard was famous for playing off the left and
Yeah.
cutting in onto the right. I think the safe answer would be doesn't seem to matter left or right. My personal opinion is I think he could be utilised best on that right, as I said, as I think he gets a bit more freedom and a bit more freedom to when he's dribbling with the ball, he'll be able to go on the outside more rather
Yeah.
than on the left where he kind of has to come inside.
Okay. So we talked a little bit, obviously, about his dribbling and so on. His strengths in particular, like what are his strengths as a footballer? Because obviously there's that main one there, but in general, what stands out about his game?
Yeah, we'll get. There's a few strengths out of the way, but we have to just finish off his dribbling, I guess, first, which
Definitely.
would be definitely 100%. As he's one of Europe's top dribblers. Like by the stats, he's attempt. I think there was a point last season where I checked in, he was completing 9 per 90 at some point in the league, and it is absolutely insane. Like, that is, I can't explain to the chat how bonkers that number is. It's just unreal. There's no need. It's like Neymar levels. I think it did drop
Wow.
off a little bit as the season went on. But like the reason that is there, it's always been a strength of his. It was a strength for Anderlecht, big reason why Rennes bought him. I think he's got better recently as he's grown and got stronger. I think you noticed that a lot in League and he kind of is able to batter defenders away from him more often. I think another strength that's kind of improving of his is decision making. Again, he spoke about this himself, where something that's changed from his game when he arrived from Anderlecht, and honestly, when he wasn't playing as much for Rennes, is that particularly back end of last season, able to make better decisions at the higher speeds he's able to gain. Pace is obviously another
Yeah.
strength of his. And that is a big thing, right? Adama Traore, I think, I can act smug and say, hey, look, I was ahead of everyone. But if you go back to February 2023, there was a tweet of me saying he's the next Adama Traore. Because at that point, he was a guy who, by and large, was able to beat 5 men, but then would fail with the final ball or the final decision. And he's really improved on that in the final months of the season.
That's good. That's good because that's always been my it sounds weird, but I sort of can't stand Adama Traore. I think it's because I do love him at the same time. Like his game is so fun, but it's just so not pointless, but there's rarely anything to all the effort. It's one of, and I think he's like maybe it's harsh because people like him should exist because the Mavericks of football and so on. But I think he's like the antithesis of Pep's football, where it's all about everything has to have a purpose and blah blah. And Adama's
well, you're a City fan, you would hate him, wouldn't you?
Shush, yes, of course. I think that's what it is. He does nothing unless he's playing Man City. What's that about, mate? But that's the thing is like people like Adama. People who dribble. One of my favorite all-time players, ex-City player, Sean Wright Phillips. So he was my hero growing up because he was a guy who dribbled and had an end product and beat people and got goals away and electric pace. And I love a dribbler, but I hate a dribbler that just dribbles for the sake of dribbling. And it's just a bit of a bugbear of mine. It's like you're actually sometimes less. You affect the team in a way. Is there a risk of this? Like, is there a risk of this like end product thing? Kind of rearing his head. Let's talk about his weaknesses then. Actually, let's go towards that as a category because what are his weaknesses in his game? How does he compare to Adama Traore in terms of that aspect and so on?
Well, yeah, you've set me up very nicely. Yeah, his weakness certainly is the end product. I mean, last season he got I think it was 6, 8 goals and assists. It was not many at all, but it was still his best season ever in terms of goal contributions. And again, like his things like shot creating actions or foot breath, like what he's, as you said, his end product, that's climbed more this season. I think that's like around from last season, that's up to like 5 per 90. This season, from like 2 games, it's like close to 7 per 90. But you probably want that higher. And the fact is that he's best yet, it is a question of, hey, is this guy improving year by year? Or was last season a bit of a flash in the pan? And are we actually going to see him drop off? Because again, this is a player as well where if you looked at just his comps, his highlights, you could paint a picture of, the next Mbappe. There's some scorching goals from last season. I think we're all thinking of that volley near the back post where Cross comes in, rifles it on his right foot. That's not been a regular occurrence with Jeremy Doku. So I think that is a gamble and a weakness of he has spoken about trying to get more efficient in the moments and making more of these, ball progression. But we still need to see him take that step up. And to counter that weakness as well, like Mohamed Salah was once this player.
Yeah.
He was once a player where we said, yeah, hey, very good in the final third until he gets in front of goal. And then he became the man he is today. So there is reason to say Doku is still young, could still improve a lot.
And a similar story would also be Raheem Sterling at one point. I remember his first season under Guardiola. I was very lucky actually. I did some work with Man City once where I did like a behind the scenes vlog thing for one of City's partners, and they'd organised one of the data analysts to give a little kind of presentation to these fans, and I was in there, and it was all sort of relatively confidential, but so I didn't see couldn't share the documents, but they showed an example how they used like data to sort of improve a player. And after Pep's first season, they looked at Raheem Sterling and said, "You could score 30 goals a season. We just need you. We need you to show how to do that." And it was one of the people showed it where there was always a particular position or something on the pitch that felt vacant in the way that they were moving. And if he got there, and they showed this footage from the top down in the training ground where they just kept repeating the same action. Leroy was running behind, and he cut it back to Sterling, and they kept doing it like hundreds and hundreds of times, that exact same movement. Then the 17-18 season happens. Sterling scores 25 goals or whatever, and it was all just pure repetition. They noticed that he was lining his body up in a certain way to shoot and so on. So I'm not saying that could happen, but it does happen. As you talked about, Salah all of a sudden learned how to score. Sterling at one point ended up a 30-goal a season for 2 or 3 years in Man City. So it's just it's
fascinating.
Yeah, it was brilliant. I wish I could have filmed it and explained it in more detail, but they had the footage and then they cut to like a goal. It was exactly the same thing. Leroy in behind. There was no defenders. They were just literally doing the same movement. The same movement. And I think it was when Arteta was there at the time, and it was brilliant. And obviously, I don't think it was instinctive for Raheem Sterling. It's one of the things that he had to be shown how to do it, and I think it probably displays a little bit of his drop off in confidence in front of goal. But if he can do that, it leads me on to the next point, which is about his potential, Jeremy Doku, because it's weird because we talk about this guy in such broad strokes, but he's young. He's really young, isn't he? Like he's feel like he's been around for an awful long time because he plays for Belgium. Does he feel like an old 21-year-old? Does he feel like he's still at the start of his career? I know it's a confusing question, but you know what I mean by that? Like, is there a sense that he, has been around for a bit and we know who he is, or does he still feel like even though he's been around, he's got a lot to learn still and he's probably got a lot of time?
For your confusing question, I'll give you a confusing answer, of course.
I know what I mean by that. It's weird. Some people
no.
Go on.
I know exactly what you mean. My answer would be both, in the sense that he is 21, and it does really feel like his career is only getting going. We're only seeing proper output now, but it does feel like he's been around for ages. And I think the big contributing factor to that has been injuries. Rennes, I think in the 21-22 season, he had 2 quite big injuries. I think a hamstring one kept him out for about 10 games or so for club and country. And it's meant he's kind of stagnated at Rennes. And, I think it's worth talking about Rennes as well. We kind of all know him, I'd say, even like in a casual sense of like big talent developers. Like Naif Aguerd, who's gone to West Ham. He came from there. Edouard Mendy turned his career around at Rennes, went to Chelsea, obviously. And they're hoarders of talent, right? I mean, Sulemana went to Southampton in January, and that's kind of a kickstart for Doku to really shine in the first team because they're sharing minutes at left wing.
Yeah.
And it's been a combination of, he's been 18, 19 breaking through. He's got a lot of competition in the squad. He's not the only player left. Neither was Sulemana. I think, Gili could as well. Martin Terrier could until he got moved to the striking position. And it's also via the combination of him growing as a footballer, starting as, for lack of a better word, Adama Traore, and then turning into more of a devastating one, where it now feels like, whoa, this is a really hot up-and-coming youngster. Someone needs to snap him up.
Do you think he has that? Like, what? I know it's hard. A very hard question because it's predicting the futures.
Oh, go on, bring it on.
But what do you think his ceiling is personally? And don't worry because obviously I know this is a Man City channel. If you don't think it's as high as maybe I hope it would be, that's absolutely fine. I'm just curious to feel like where you feel like his career could go. Obviously, presuming if the environment fits and so on. It's very difficult because obviously there's so many factors that come into it. But say that everything goes smoothly for him, he fits in at Manchester City. How far could he go as a footballer?
It's a good question. I think why I like him to Manchester City is because he feels a big role, we'll touch on in a bit. And it's not necessarily him becoming the star of the team, but providing a different profile to what they have in the squad. So in that sense, his potential might be a supercharged version of what he is, a very, very good player at taking someone on 1v1 and doing something at the end of it. But I think personally, it's hard to gauge if a player will become, 20,
Yeah.
30 goal and assist season player. But I do think he's dribbling. That's a limitless ceiling. And that's such a important skill, like going forward in the game, right? I think the Premier League's becoming a little more transitional nowadays. City are bringing it on themselves. Sometimes they will play long balls to Haaland just to break him behind as fast as
Yeah.
possible. But you're always going to come up against a mean, don't want to say Burnley because they've obviously changed around from your legend, but you're going to come across a mean Everton. That's the better team to use at the moment.
I mean
Where,
Everton. Yeah.
yes, a horrible deep block that you look at and you go, oh no, I can't be asked to play with them today.
Boo Everton.
And then a player like Doku has that moment of magic, and in that sense, I think he could be a player that will beat any deep block in the world, that will at least create one goal scoring chance against any horrible defense in the world, be it Everton or an Atletico Madrid. So in that regard, his potential is sky high. So in the other aspects of his game, I wouldn't say it's not a sky high. I just think it's harder to judge.
Yeah, I think that's it's incredibly fair. I mean, it's possible to guess. You never know. You see a player with all the talent in the world, and they disappear by 25, and vice versa. Someone can just emerge at 25, and like Fernandinho, it didn't emerge, but he was over in Shakhtar, and then all of a sudden he was one of the best ever defensive midfielders by the age of 32 in the Premier League history. And he was still a very good player, but you know what I'm saying? Levels, he couldn't Premier League at 28, and you never know where someone's going to go. I do love this quote by Mbappe, by the way, which obviously you've probably seen is going around. He said, "In 5 years as a professional, I've never seen someone from a standing start demonstrate so much power." And I think there was one for Henry where he was like, "You're in big trouble if he gets you one-on-one." And I think we talk about like those two people. I mean, they are the epitome of what I guess he would want to be. Mbappe and Henry, they're probably his heroes. And if you want, someone, they say game recognises game. That gets me going, because those two, they understand it. I hope he can reach his potential. It does sort of lead me on to the next line, which is talking about, there's all that potential, but you have to be the right fit somewhere, And Pep's style is so particular. It's so unique. But at the same time, I've always argued that Pep doesn't really have a style. He has a moment. It depends. It's funny because everyone's like, he's not a Guardiola winger. Everyone forgets Grealish and Mahrez weren't 3 years ago. It was Sonny Sterling, and then before that it was, Pedro or Kingsley Coman. It's always changed, hasn't it, basically? How do you feel he's going to adapt to Pep's style? And are there any signs of him understanding, a more possession-based game, because he's not going to be able to run every time he gets the ball? Like, do you think he has the potential or the intelligence or the wherewithal about him to slow his game down if needs be?
I think he has both. I think both on and off the field, he's a good match at City. I mean, off the field, he's got a very nice character. He's been described. Yeah, he's described as someone who's quite shy, like to a lot of people, but behind the scenes, a bit more of a prankster, a bit more confident. But there's still like this shy kid era to him. Like you mentioned, Thierry Henry. Here's one from Doku about Henry, where he said, obviously Henry was the assistant manager at the Belgian national team. And he said when he met Henry, he was a lot less scary than he thought, to that effect. which in fairness, I can imagine Henry was probably terrifying, especially with his clips at Monaco, where he was like telling people to sit in their chair and stuff. Very fun. But in terms of on the pitch, it's a good point you mentioned about Mahrez and Grealish. I'd also point to Sterling leaving. I think when Sterling left, that was a key to me to think, even when City changed halfway through the season, they're missing a player of Sterling's profile, someone who can take someone 1v1. And exact same thing happened with Riyad Mahrez. Like, he's now left. I think there's a big hole in that squad. Like, Jack Grealish can do it to an extent, of course, but someone who has that raw pace and power and phenomenal ability in the 1v1. So it's a sense of something else in Guardiola's toolbox he can throw on to a team. Doku will definitely be like a super sub at first, even as he beds into Pep's team. Someone to come on, and when maybe a City are drawing or losing, he can help upset a defence that are no doubt sitting back against City. So in that regard, it's great. About the possession-based football, I think there's 2 points to this. One, again, I'd say to his off-the-field quotes. I think there's been a couple, again, to the website I mentioned earlier, that he seems to recognise that he needs to be efficient in the final third. It's not all about, lack of a better term, hero ball, right? It's not about just taking everyone on and then shooting. He does.
I like that term, by the way. That's what my problem with Adama is, hero ball. It's like, no, stop it. Be more. Be smarter.
Yeah.
But go on.
I was going to say I've been going through my notes on him over the past a couple of seasons, and more often than not, honestly, you get like the positive things I've written down are Doku, great dribble and a really good pass, or not even
Yeah.
a dribble, just picks up the ball, good pass through. So I think the signs are there for him to adapt to Pep Guardiola's football.
I was actually surprised when I did the whole gorge on a player when you start watching him, and because obviously he was linked to City, and he seems like a nice passer actually with either foot, which surprised me. There was a couple of times where I was like, oh, he's just played a really nice pass with his left foot, cutting in from the right, or little real smart ones where he's like a 2-yard pass that you would never expect him to play just behind a defender. Like those, essentially, there was always a meme amongst City fans for ages about, the guy will get it if he passes 4 yards from goal. Like Kovacic did it the other day, and David Silva famously did it. Like instead of shooting from about a yard out, and like there's a couple of moments where I saw him passing when you wouldn't really think anyone would, and I was like, that's actually unexpected. Like there's a little bit of awareness of those around him to him, so he's not all just pace and power and so on. And I guess as well, what I'm hoping is, I'm not sure if you saw the Newcastle City game the other day, but like towards the end of the game, both of those teams they were blowing, they were absolutely knackered, and it's weird, even though City were winning, I felt that's a time where Doku would be fascinating to watch, because at that point, Newcastle changing it, just put him up near the halfway line, giving the ball, and that's just trouble. That's absolute trouble, because you got, I don't know, Sven Botman or Dan Burn chasing him down. They ain't catching him, so like.
And the reverse of that is like, some teams will gamble and push players forward. Other teams, I think, which Pep will be aware of, is they'll go, Doku's staying forward, we're going to have to keep someone else back, which inevitably makes their attack weaker. Exactly, always come back to the defensive mindset of Pep.
Well, absolutely. I got a theory that he just wants to be the best. I think he's going for like some stupid record now, like minimum goals or something. I don't know. He's the most defensive coach in world football, probably, weirdly. But that's just, that's Pep in a nutshell. The last point, you sort of touched it anyway, but it was a thought I had. What his injury record is that known to be particularly bad then? And do you know much about the kind of injuries that he's had or anything like that? Because obviously that comes up a lot in conversation when we talk about this player.
The kindest compliment I can pay, I mean, I've not really dug into his injury record in terms of the media. I think I've heard him speak briefly about it, but the kindest compliment I could pay is you could watch him play and forget he was injured. Like,
okay,
this good. Isn't a player, it isn't a player who, came out as a really big, bright prospect, had injuries, and now looks quite hampered. Like a Zaniolo, who at Roma was really positive, then went to Turkey, didn't work out. Doku's almost the opposite, right? He came through pretty promising. It's had his injuries. He's come through. It doesn't look like it's affected him physically at all. So that's the kindest compliment I could pay on that regard.
Yeah, that's reassuring, because obviously with a player with that much locomotion and that much explosiveness to his game, and I think that's a word we're going to have to get used to as City fans, explosive, because he just is. There's going to be some growing pains, I guess, when you're that young, and there just is. But his body's adapting to growth, immense growth, and obviously turning professional. And I'm hoping, that from my perspective, we see a similar story to Erling Haaland, where everyone was telling us he was going to be injured.
That's what I was about to say, yeah.
Yeah, when actually, maybe his body stabilised a little bit, because you look at Haaland 4 years ago, he was about 3 inches shorter than he was now, and it's like he shot up a lot, didn't he, with his height and his physicality, and maybe also the Dortmund Docs is probably, I don't know if they were on it as much as maybe Man City's are, but I know City do they don't spare any expense looking after their players. So I'm hoping the injuries won't be too bad at Man City. But Alex, mate, I've really enjoyed that. It's been absolutely fascinating. I just want to say thank you for coming on. Also, by the way, someone put his number's gonna be 11. How good does JD11 sound? The footballers have their little kind of hashtags or whatever. JD11. Yeah. That's good. That, man, it's good. Alex,
that's a TLDR.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Alex, thank you so much for coming on, mate. It's been a pleasure having you. Where can people find you, by the way?
Thank you very much for having me on. You can find me at EuroExpert on Twitter. You can also find videos upcoming on Tifo Football as well. Should be able to find a lot of nice stuff coming out.
Tifo IRL, the best YouTube channel out there for football. I absolutely love it. It's great stuff. Guys, thank you very much for watching this video. Let me know down in the comments what you made of this video, of course, and what you expect and what you hope for from our new signing, JD11, Jeremy Doku. Fingers crossed, he's going to be wonderful. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. There'll be loads more content. I did a video early this morning called The Rivals with Joe Tomlinson, chatting about the Premier League games at the weekend. And of course, tomorrow, I think we're going to sign this guy. So fingers crossed there'll be more stuff coming your way. Anyway, it's like half 9. I'm knackered. I'm tired. Gotta go in a bit. Bye-bye. And cheers, Alex. Thank you very much, mate.